Surprise trading is one of the most randomized things you can do in any Pokemon game. This paired with a hardcore Nuzlocke makes for an extremely difficult gameplay experience that I'm unfortunately gonna put myself through. In this run, my goal is to make it all the way to the end and see if I can beat Professor Toro. Also, this video took literal weeks to record, so if you end up enjoying the content, please consider subscribing. That being said, let's see if we can beat him. First things first, I start my journey through this dangerous region of Paldea and I get myself a starter. This starter is quickly shipped off and it allows me to get my first Wonder Trade Pokemon, Cyclizar. In this Wonderlock, I'm going to be doing a surprise trade after every gym, but for this first one, I'm going to be doing 2 surprise trades just to guarantee I don't get screwed over right off the bat. Once I get that second trade finished, I find myself with a Rockruff that I named Rocky after my awful dog IRL. Continuing on in the story means I have to go through Tech Simulator and Mesagoza, and after I go through that, I get all 3 of my storylines and I'm able to ride a Miraidon towards the first gym. I didn't mention it earlier, but I'm going to be trying to complete this game without terrestrializing, which makes it really difficult. That being said, after pushing around an Olive for hours, I find myself fighting Katie in my first gym battle. She leads the battle with Nimble as I lead with Rocky. Nimble is easily one-shotted by a rock throw, and this leads into the next Pokemon, Tarantula. I kinda assumed I would just one-shot again, but I actually don't, and I bring Tarantula down to what seems like 1 HP. Tarantula then hits me with a bug bite, but it hardly matters though, as I hit a tackle on the next turn that finishes off the spider and leads into the final Pokemon, Teddiursa. Teddiursa is definitely a bit more difficult to take out, but 2 rock throws does the trick, and that wins me my first badge. Next up is the Stony Cliff Titan, Cloth, and as I'm making my way there, I bring out my Cyclizar, who has the move Power Whip. Power Whip is a super strong grass move that I use to essentially destroy the Stony Cliff Titan. This wasn't that bad, but I did get a couple of scratches when Cloth actually slammed me into this wall. Next up is another Wonder Trade, and for this one, I get myself a Sprigatito. This Sprigatito came from Japan, and because of this, I can't actually change the nickname, so I'm just not gonna do nicknames for this run. That being said, I really hope this just says Sprigatito in Japanese. Moving on, I evolve this grass cat into a Florigato, then I head into Artisan so I can challenge my next gym. After finding all the Sunflora, I get in my battle with Brassius, and he leads the battle with Petalil as I lead with Florigato. Now I'm gonna keep it a buck. This gym was not hard. I set up 6 home clauses right here because Petalil can't do any damage to me. That being said, after setting up, I finish off Petalil and Smoliv, and this leads into the final Pokemon, Sudowoodo. Now I didn't realize this before, but Sudowoodo is really bulky, as when I hit him with a bite, it doesn't even do half. Luckily, I got a flinch on Sudowoodo with my second bite, so a third one is enough to take him out. With badge 2, I've got another Wonder Trade to do, and this one ends up getting me a Fletchling. This Fletchling is actually German, and after getting it, I end up evolving it into a Fletchinder so I can go challenge Bombardier. I hope that's how you say that one. As I go up the hill to face Big Bird, I get pelted with what I hope are rocks, but you can never really tell, and once I get in the battle with him, I lead with Cyclizar. Cyclizar learns this move called Breaking Swipe, and this move is extremely good, as every time I hit it, it lowers the attack stat of the Titan. This means each turn I'm taking less and less damage as I'm doing the maximum amount I can. With that and the help of Knackley, I'm able to finish off Bombardier, and this leads me into getting another Sandwich, and this time I actually see what Arvin's talking about. It's his dog. Going through this game the first time really had me getting emotional during this part. I mean, seriously, Pokemon had no right to make Arvin's storyline so good. It's time for my first Team Starbase, and really, these things are just super annoying. This is probably my least favorite part about the game, considering I really didn't care about this story whatsoever. That being said, for this first one, I've got to go up against Giacomo. I'm not even gonna try that again. It's not that bad, especially with Cyclizar's Breaking Swipe, but what is bad is the storyline afterwards. Like I said before, I really don't care about this. Also, like, from the start, I knew who Cassiopeia was. Like, seriously, it was not that hard to figure out. Regardless, it's time for Gym 3 and a fight against Nemona. To be honest, my team is pretty solid at this point in the game, so it's really easy to defeat Nemona. This then brings me on to Mr. Walksabout, who is really bad at hiding about. I didn't really have a good bit for that one. Before starting my fight with Iona, I decide to move around the Paldea region and find myself the TM for Rock Slide. This Rock Slide becomes important while I'm in the battle, and you'll see why later. Iona leads with Wattrella as I lead with Cyclizar, and 2 Breaking Swipes are enough to finish off this bird, and this leads into the next Pokemon, Luxio. Luxio immediately hits me with that Intimidate as I go for a Breaking Swipe that does almost half, and it lowers Luxio's attack. Another Breaking Swipe does the exact same thing, and it brings Luxio down to -2 attack. With Luxio at -2, 2, I feel safe enough to switch into Rocky and start setting up Swords Dances. I only really feel comfortable enough to set up 2 before eventually going for a Trailblaze to raise my speed 1 as Luxio goes down. On the following turn comes out Belly Bolt, and for Belly Bolt I go for a Dig, which is enough to finish him off with a one-shot, and this leads into the final Pokemon, Mismagius. Now you can probably see why I had that Rock Slide. Mismagius has Levitate, so I can't hit her with Dig. This means I've got only one solid move I can use, and that's Rock Slide. Thankfully, with that Trailblaze I set up earlier and that +4 attack I'm at right now, that's enough to finish off Mismagius and win me my 3rd badge. It's now time for another Wonder Trade, and this time I get myself a Charcadet. Charcadet is absolutely going to help me out later in this run, especially when I get myself a Ceruledge. For now though, I'm focused on evolving some other Pokemon, specifically my Rockruff. For a really long while, I was trying to figure out how to get myself a Dusk form Lycanroc because he's simply just busted. Going on Pokemon B made me realize that I need a Rockruff with Own Tempo in order to get that, so I checked my ability and shockingly enough, it was actually Own Tempo. Now I've simply just gotta wait for it to start turning night and give my Rockruff a rare candy so I can get this rare form of Lycanroc. This is gonna help me out a ton in my next Team Starbase as it's a Fire type one, so it should be pretty easy now. I was absolutely correct with this theory as 2 Rock Slides finish off the entire Team Starmobile. Next up is this stupid Earth Titan Orthworm, who is just a really dumb looking Pokemon. Though he does seem pretty happy to see me, I will not lie. Me and Arvin ended up taking this guy down pretty smoothly as I went for a ton of breaking swipes with Cyclizar. With that over with, I've got to meet this guy with possibly the worst cut I've ever seen in my life, and I've got to fight him in my next gym battle. Actually, no I can't. I've got to bid my money in order to fight this guy. Like, seriously? It's fine though, it's chill. I'm ready to get into this fight and absolutely destroy this guy with Rocky. Now you might say, Zango, why are you leading with Rocky in this fight? And the simple answer is, I found a Pastro Berry and I wanted to use it. That being said, I started by setting up Swords Dance as I get hit by an Aqua Cutter that brings me down to 57. I definitely took a fair bit of damage from that, but it was definitely worth it as I'm able to raise my speed because of a Trailblaze in the next turn. This Trailblaze leads me into Wugtrio, and Wugtrio has possibly the worst special attack stat I've ever seen, so when I get hit by a Water Pulse from this thing, it really doesn't do too much damage. Knowing this, I decided to take the opportunity to set up another Swords Dance, but unfortunately, after getting hit by that Water Pulse, I got confused. Now this is pretty scary, but I decided to go through the confusion anyways, and I hit a Crush Claw on the Wugtrio, finishing him off. The final Pokemon to come out is the ugliest Pokemon known to man, and that's Crabominable. Because I like to live life on the edge, I decided to go for another Trailblaze while confused, and thankfully, I actually get through it, and it's enough to finish off Crabominable. With that 4th gym badge acquired, it's time for another Wonder Trade, and this one yields me a Magikarp. Using some small EXP candies, I immediately evolve this thing into Gyarados so I can start using it. I've got to start using this thing pretty much right away as I start my journey towards the Poison Team Starbase. Now this one is essentially just as easy as the last, and pretty much for the exact same reason too. Rocky is just busted in this mid-game section. After a couple of dances, I'm able to go for just 1 dig, and that's enough to one-shot the entire Starmobile. That's crazy. After we witnessed what happened a year ago for the 3rd time, I'm able to go to the normal gym. Before going inside, I evolve my Fletch into the Talonflame and my Florigatto into Meowscarada. In this normal gym, I witness at least half a dozen people collapse into the floor, and then I'm ready to challenge Larry. He seems to have no regard for human life as we're just battling with dangerous Pokemon in a cafe. Seems really safe, man. Regardless, he leads the battle with Harris as I lead with Meowscarada. This gym battle is made pretty easy when you have a Chesto Berry. I set up 2 Hone Clauses as I get hit by a Yawn, and after waking up from the Yawn, I just go for a Flower Trick. This strategy is enough to finish off Komala, but not to Dunsparce, as I get a really low damage roll that brings her down into the red. Thankfully, Dunsparce doesn't really have that great a move, so I end up getting hit by a Glare, which really only paralyzes me. This Glare doesn't matter too much as I still outspeed and am able to go for a Bite. With that, the final Pokemon Staraptor comes out and immediately terastallizes into a normal type as I switch into Rocky. Rocky gets hit by an Aerial Ace on the switch in that does not very effective damage, as on the following turn I go for a Rock Slide and end up flinching. I then go for another Rock Slide, bringing Staraptor down into the red as I then get hit by a Fachade, which is really powerful. Yeah, I know it's not Fachade, but that's how I read it as a kid, and that's how I read it right now, so I cannot change it. It's whatever. Regardless, a Trailblaze finishes off Staraptor in the next turn, and that wins me badge number 5. Moving on with that, I've got another fight against Nimona, and this time I sweep her again. It's just kind of really easy, these battles. That being said, I'm now at a high enough level to get myself some Sinistea chips so I can evolve my Charcadet into Ceruledge. After doing this, I find myself in another Wonder Trade in which I get a Mugray. This right here is my final obstacle before challenging the best gym leader in this game, Rhyme. For this battle, I lead with Meowscarada and Gyarados, and I start out by going for a Night Slash and Bayonet, which one-shots, and I go for a Crunch and Mimikyu that just breaks the disguise. is. On the next turn, Rhyme replaces Bayonet with a Houndstone, and this thing simply just succumbs to the exact same fate as a Night Slash finishes it off with a one-shot. I then go for yet another crunch on Mimikyu that brings her down into the red as the last Pokemon to come out is Toxtricity. This poor Pokemon decides to Ghost Terra, which is really bad considering I was going for Night Slash. Toxtricity gets absolutely obliterated as Mimikyu follows soon after, and that wins me my 6th gym badge. It's at this point in the game where I can start buying myself some mints, and these mints are really important when it comes to changing my natures. Pretty much all the Pokemon I have right now have their best nature being adamant, so I bought myself like 3 adamant mints and used every single one of them. I then do my wonder trade in which I get myself a Yungoos that's nicknamed Ferret, so yay. Regardless of that though, I move on to Iron Treads, who's just standing there menacingly waiting for me to approach. You'd really think that this thing wouldn't be easy to defeat, but it really is. A couple of flower tricks are all it takes, and this thing goes off scrambling. Me and Arvin track this thing down and challenge it to a really unfair 2v1 so we can incinerate it and get to our next Orb Mystica. After getting it, I'm off towards Gym 7, in which I fight Nimona yet again. Her team really does struggle against mine, and this leads me on to challenging the Gym Challenge here, which isn't really much of a challenge at all. It's more of like a really big annoyance. After wasting my time for about 10 years through that gym challenge, I'm able to challenge Tulip in my 7th gym battle, and she leads the battle with Frigoraph as I lead with Ceruledge. Ceruledge is an absolute monster when it comes to dealing with these psychic types. I mean, I set up a couple of Swords Dances at the start of this battle, and then it was just really a sweep city. Shadow Claws take me all the way to the end to Florges, who also goes down to a Shadow Claw, and that wins me my 7th gym battle. The next level cap of this run belongs to the final gym leader, Grusha. As was pointed out to me so many times in my last video, Grusha is in fact a dude. Thank you all for that. He leads the battle with Frostmoth as I lead with Ceruledge. My Ceruledge is an absolute monster, so I start this battle off by setting up 3 consecutive Swords Dances and then going for a Flame Charge, which raises my speed. This Flame Charge burns up Frostmoth and leads into the next Pokemon, Beartic. Beartic gets smoked by a Flame Charge and leads into the next Pokemon, Cetitan. Cetitan is really tanky and also has the ability Thick Fat, which means my fire moves are doing half the damage they usually do, but it really doesn't matter. I am at +6. It is over. Cetitan and Grusha's final Pokemon, Altaria, both go down to 2 Bitter Blades, and that wins me my battle against Grusha. I'm now ready for my final Wonder Trade, and after doing it, I get myself a Talonflame, which I already have, so I use Dupe's Claws to get myself another Pokemon, and this one ended up being a Dreepy. Either way, even if you don't count Dupe's Claws, I didn't get my one for the 7th gym, so it really doesn't matter either way. I now start to look at the money I have in this game, and I realize I've got a lot, so I go ahead and buy myself a couple of bottle caps so I can hyper train my Gyarados. The reason I did this was because Gyarados is the only way I deal with Ortega. I mean, his team is really strong. Along with doing this, I get myself a couple of TMs just to make this fight a little bit easier, specifically the TM Ironhead, which is super effective against his fairy types. Now, I'm able to absolutely roll this Starmobile, and I almost one-shot him with a single Ironhead. 2 Ironheads easily does the trick, and that wins me my fight against the 4th Team Starbase. With that all finished up, I watch this Circle of Life as Tatsugiri gets eaten by this Dondozo, who is absolutely massive. Unfortunately for Dondozo, size doesn't really matter much when you're getting hit constantly by super effective critical hit flower tricks. That being said, it's just as not effective when me and Arvin are both going for super effective moves on this thing, and it goes down pretty swiftly as next out comes Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri also pretty quickly gets taken down as this allows me and Arvin to get our final Herb Mystica. All that leads into the saddest cutscene of this entire game, and oh my god, this had me tearing up. I'm not gonna lie to you. It's alright. I'm not gonna cry. I'm just gonna go to the worst storyline ever and fight more Team Star. As Team Star's official #1 hater, I absolutely annihilate Eerie in this fight. Originally, I had a pretty crazy strategy. I was gonna bring in my Talonflame and my Cyclizar. I was gonna set up Swords Dance a couple of times, maybe go for a Brave Bird with Sharp Beak, but in the end, I decided to just bring in my Ceruledge. To start this battle off, I switched out my Gyarados into Ceruledge, and Ceruledge ended up getting hit by a Poison Jab, which activated my weak armor, lowering my defense by 1 stage, but raising my speed by 2. At this point, I know what moves the CPU has, and I know that Toxicroak is always going to go for a Sucker Punch as long as he has the PP for it. That being said, if I can waste that PP, I don't have to worry about Sucker Punch whatsoever, so I decided to set up 5 consecutive sword stances, and it baits out every single one of the sucker punches. From here, I simply just sweep the whole thing with Bitter Blade, and that wins me my final team star base. My level cap right now is really high, so I do a couple of raids to bring myself just a little bit closer to that so I can challenge Arven. His team, disrespectfully, is horrible. I mean, it's awful. I just set up Dragon Dance with Gyarados and destroyed every single one of his Pokemon. Not only that, but he also brought in his final Pokemon, Mabostiff, who literally just got healthy. Like, not but 20 minutes ago, was just standing up for the first time, and now Arven's putting him in battle? Are you serious? Whatever, that's really not any of my business, but I move on and fight Penny, who is really just Cassiopeia, I think? And it's not. It's just a really messed up story. She's got a team of evolutions that gets absolutely destroyed by my Lycanroc and Ceruledge. With that storyline is over, and I'm able to use some of the EXP candies that I got to evolve my Dracolock into Dracopult. This is surely going to help me out, as now I'm ready to challenge the Elite Four. Before challenging the Elite Four, I've got to go through this interview, which is just really tedious of all things. I mean, they asked me what school I go to. Like, they think I have dementia? I was just there like 30 seconds ago. But I digress, we're about the Elite Four, and this Elite Four gets rolled really easily. My first fight against Rika goes really well. My Meowscarada almost one-shots everything on our team, so it really wasn't that big of an issue. The only problem was right at the end, and it was her Clodsire who just went down to a couple of Iron Heads. Next up is Poppy, who leads with a Copperjaw as I lead with my Ceruledge and start out by setting up 2 consecutive Swords Dances. Copperjaw then hits me with a high horsepower, but it doesn't do enough damage to kill me, and it activates my weak armor. I reckon with a crit that probably would have killed, but I had a really solid backup strategy anyways, so I really didn't care that much. Regardless, at +4 attack and +4 speed, I basically stomp anything in my way. I even managed to heal up to full after going for a ton of Bitter Blades. The last Pokemon to come out was a Tinkaton, who just gets, you know, bye-bye. The next fight was essentially the exact same thing. I outspeed every single Pokemon on Larry's team, and I can just set up a Swords Dance right at the beginning of the fight. Once Flamigo goes down, the final Elite Four member, Hassel, comes out, and he leads the battle with Noivern as I lead with Dragapult. With Dragapult, I Dragon Dance Sweep, and that wins me my Elite Four. Now I'm on to fight the champion, Geeta, and she leads the battle with Espathra as I lead with Dragapult. Against this thing, I start out by going for a Phantom Force as she goes for a Dazzling Gleam. On the next turn, I outspeed and finish off Espathra as next out comes Go-Goat. This poor thing gets nailed by a critical hit U-turn that brings him down into the red as I then switch out into Ceruledge. On the switch in, Go-Goat sets up a Bulk Up as on the next turn I go for a Swords Dance as Go-Goat hits me with a Zen Headbutt. We all know what happens next to this poor Go-Goat. I'm at +2 attack and speed, so a single Bitter Blade finishes him off as that leads into the next Pokemon, Avalugg. Avalugg could be pretty tough here. Her defense stat is through the roof, so I'm not really sure if I'll one-shot. That being said, I decide to go for a Bitter Blade anyways, and thankfully I do end up OHKOing. Next up is King Gambit, who also gets one-shotted by a Bitter Blade, and so does Veluza to a Shadow Claw. This all leads into the final Pokemon, Glamora, who immediately terastallizes into Rock. I kinda just assumed I would one-shot here, but I actually don't, as I get a critical hit Shadow Claw that just brings her down to 1 HP. It's at this point where I start to cross my fingers, hoping Glamora doesn't kill me with an Earth Power, and thankfully, I don't end up going down as another Shadow Claw finishes off Glamora and wins me my fight against Geeta. Now I've only got a handful of things left to do in this game. The first of which is deal with Nemona, and her team, as usual, is not that great. Her final Pokemon, Meowscarada, gets easily taken down by my Talonflame, and we're in the endgame now. This is where Arven, Nemona, and Penny attempt to ditch me by jumping on Miraidon's back into Area 0. Thankfully, I stuck my hand out just in time to get on, but I kinda wish I didn't get on at all, as their topics down here, their conversation is just so awful. I get that the conversation down here is meant to like get them to connect or whatever, but then just add voice acting, come on. Regardless, I'm now ready to go fight Toro. Toro leads the battle with Iron Moth as I lead with Dragapult. I start out by setting up a Dragon Dance as Iron Moth hits me with an Air Slash, doing about a third. On the following turn, I set up a second Dragon Dance as I get hit by another Air Slash, bringing me down to about a third remaining. After this, I go for a Dragon Darts, finishing off Iron Moth, and this leads into Iron Jugulis. These future forms are actually no joke, as when I go for a Dragon Darts, I don't even kill this Iron Jugulis. I leave him with a sliver remaining as he's able to finish me off with a Dragon Pulse. So now I move into Rocky and go for Accelerock, which finishes off Iron Jugulis and leads into Iron Thorns. With Iron Thorns out, I make the decision to stick in and go for a Crunch to hopefully get a defense drop, and I do. Iron Thorns then hits me with an Earthquake that brings me down to 19 HP, and on the next turn I try to kill with another Crunch, but no dice. Iron Thorns is left in the red as I get taken down by another Earthquake, and this leads into my next Pokemon, Meowscarada. A Flower Trick is enough to finish off Iron Thorns, and next is Iron Bundle. Iron Bundle hits me with a Freeze Dry that does a ton of damage. It takes me all the way down to 12 as I hit a Flower Trick, and Thankfully, it's super effective and kills. With Iron Hands in, I decided to try to go for a play rough, and I didn't realize this thing had fake out, so it ends up taking out my Meowscarada. With 3 Pokemon remaining, I decided to switch out into Ceruledge and go for a Swords Dance. Iron Hands then hits me with a Thunder Punch that brings me down to 88 and activates my weak armor. On the next turn, I hope to kill with a Bitter Blade, but I hardly even do half. Thankfully, due to the Bitter Blade, I heal up just enough to where another Thunder Punch doesn't kill me. Now, with me at 14 HP, I'm finally able to take out Iron Hands, and this leads into the final Pokemon, Iron Valiant. This thing is a crazy good Pokemon, and when I go for a Bitter Blade, it doesn't kill. It brings her down to a sliver, and she finishes me off. That being said, even with how good Iron Valiant is, my Talonflame is just better. I outspeed, and I'm able to finish her off with an Aerial Ace. That right there is enough to finish off Professor Toro and win me this Wonderlock. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing because stuff like that really does help me out. And with that being said, that was my attempt at a Pokemon Violet Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Wonder Traded Pokemon.